Hello, my name's Suzanne Higgott. I'm a curator at the Wallace Collection in London. I'm very interested in the life of Sir Richard Wallace, one of the founders of the Wallace Collection and a great philanthropist. In Great Britain, he's best known for the Wallace Collection, which is located at Hertford House in central London, Sir Richard and Lady Wallace's former home. The collection was bequeathed to the nation by Sir Richard's widow, Lady Wallace, in 1897. In Paris, however, Richard Wallace is best known for his association with more than 100 cast-iron fountains which are spread across the city. They're affectionately known as Les Wallaces. You may have noticed one of these distinctive green fountains tucked into the northeast corner of our forecourt here at the museum. It comprises 4 caryatid-like figures surmounting a plinth, encircling the fountain's well and supporting a dome-like cover. Although English, Richard Wallace was brought up in Paris and only moved to England in his early 50s, in late 1871 or early 1872, following French defeat in the Franco-Prussian War. The war saw the devastating siege of Paris, which was followed from March to May 1871 by the terrible civil conflict known as the Commune. The scarcity of free drinking water in Paris, exacerbated by the destruction caused by these events, led Wallace to offer 45 models of this fountain to the city and 5 wall-mounted fountains. Both models were designed by the French sculptor Charles-Auguste Le Bourg and made by the Val d'Osner foundry in Haute-Marne in France. The first of Wallace's fountains were installed in Paris in 1872, so this year their 150th anniversary is being celebrated in Paris and here at the Wallace Collection. Intriguingly, this fountain, a later copy of Le Bourg's model, that was made at the same French foundry as the originals, was commissioned at the end of 1903 or the beginning of 1904 for the centre of a site in Shoreditch called the Oval, in Windsor Terrace, City Road, in London's working-class East End. On learning in 1959 that the fountain no longer functioned, the Wallace Collection's director, Sir James Mann, initiated its move to Hertford House. The fountain was the 4th to be commissioned for the borough of Shoreditch by the Metropolitan Public Gardens Association, which had been founded in 1882. The association lobbied for more public open spaces in urban areas and raised funds for laying out gardens and playgrounds in the poorest and most crowded districts in London. At midday on the 5th of July 1904, an opening ceremony for the fountain was held at the Oval in Windsor Terrace. A journalist reported that a company of working people quickly gathered round. At the ceremony, the Oval was described as having been a shabby little place before St Luke's Vestry had acquired its lease from St Bartholomew's Hospital in 1896, and it had been opened to the public. In his speech, the Mayor of Shoreditch said that the Borough Council would undertake to keep the fountain in good repair and to uphold it in every way, and that they would be especially grateful to the donor for giving them a fountain of such a beautiful design. The movement to install public drinking fountains was part of a general trend during the Victorian period to improve the lives of the poor. Lack of good quality drinking water caused serious illnesses, including cholera, which resulted in many deaths. As an alternative to impure water, people drank alcohol, which often resulted in alcoholism. The temperance movement, to which Wallace was sympathetic, was at its height in the later 19th century. It advocated moderating or abstaining from alcohol consumption. The first public drinking fountain in London was opened in April 1859 at St Sepulchre without Newgate Churchyard on Holborn Viaduct. Soon, 7,000 people were reported to be using it daily. At this time, poverty and urban slums were endemic in London's East End, and the area was a particular focus of attention for amenity groups trying to improve the lives of London's poor. The opening of the huge Victoria Fountain in the East End's Victoria Park on the 30th of June 1862 was a noteworthy occasion. The philanthropist Angela Burdett Coutts donated it at the enormous cost of £6,000 and opened it before a crowd of some 10,000 people. The bronze cups attached to it by chains were engraved with the motto, "Temperance is a bridle of gold." The temperance facilitating aspect of drinking fountains was also mentioned in reports of the opening of the Wallace Collection's fountain in Windsor Terrace in 1904. The Islington Gazette observed that the fountain will do the neighbouring public houses no good, poor things. The drinking fountains movement was paternalistic and moralising. Biblical phrases linking the gift of water to the gift of salvation were often inscribed on fountains. There was debate as to whether fountains should be merely practical or whether they should also be artistic, since, as one campaigner noted in 1859, developing and refining tastes for the beautiful and pure must exercise upon the depressed and weary children of toil an ennobling effect. When in 1897 the Metropolitan Public Gardens Association advertised a design competition, the results were disappointing. In 1901, a former MP called Dudley Fortescue alerted the association to drinking fountains he'd admired on the continent, leading to a search for continental models that would be suitable for London. It was in this context that our Wallace Fountain came to be commissioned for Windsor Terrace in London's East End, where water supply was still a problem. At a meeting of the Metropolitan Public Gardens Association on the 5th of November 1902, it was announced that designs for fountains, and particulars respecting those erected in Paris by Sir Richard Wallace, had been procured through the British ambassador, Sir Edward Monson, from the Société du Val d'Ausne. The designs for bronzed fountains were much admired, and it was agreed to ask for patterns of fountains which the Society could supply for London at prices between £25 and £50, £50 and £75, and £75 and £100. 5 Société Val d'Ausne drinking fountains were provided in London by the Metropolitan Public Gardens Association in 1903–4, including the one at the Oval in Windsor Terrace. Dudley Fortescue either donated or facilitated the donation of 4 of them. He donated this fountain for Albert Gardens in Stepney in 1903. Its ornate pedestal is surmounted by a male figure personifying summer. At a meeting of the Metropolitan Public Gardens Association on the 2nd of December 1903, the chairman stated that a friend who desired to be anonymous had kindly promised to pay for a fountain similar to those erected in the city of Paris by the late Sir Richard Wallace, and that he and the secretary had fixed on Windsor Terrace, City Road, as a suitable site for which to offer it. Dudley Fortescue had facilitated the donation. By the late 1950s, the fountain no longer worked, and in 1959 the Wallace Collection's director, Sir James Mann, asked Shoreditch Council whether it could be transferred to Hertford House because of the association with Sir Richard Wallace. On the 2nd of July, Sir James reported to the Wallace Collection's trustees that he'd heard that morning that the Shoreditch Borough Council had agreed to present the fountain to Hertford House, provided that no expense in doing so fell on the borough, and that a plaque was put on it recording the gift. At their meeting on the 3rd of March 1960, the trustees inspected the fountain, which the Ministry of Works had installed and connected to the water main. Several specimens of paint were viewed, and it was decided to paint the fountain the same colour as the railings of the front garden, namely dark blue. 4 months later, the trustees inspected the fountain, now painted dark blue. They approved its colour and the wording of the inscription. Today, the fountain no longer functions. It's painted green, the traditional Wallace fountain colour. At a Shoreditch Council meeting in September 1960, attendees heard that the fountain had been installed at Hertford House and that a photograph of it on its new site would be exhibited in the council chamber. Both the council's archive, now in Hackney, and the Wallace collection have copies of this photograph taken in 1960. The installation of the fountain at Hertford House was newsworthy. The relocation of the Wallace fountain from the East End to Hertford House has echoes of another relocation associated with Sir Richard Wallace. For between 1872, when the first Wallace fountains were being installed in Paris, and 1875, when he moved into Hertford House, Wallace lent more than 2,000 works of art to a new museum in the East End, the Bethnal Green Museum. The exhibition was a great success and attracted local people who would not otherwise have had the opportunity to see Wallace's magnificent collection. The Wallace Fountain embodies the connection between Hertford House, the home of the Wallace collection, and Wallace's philanthropy in Paris and London's East End. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you will look out for our Wallace Fountain next time you visit the Wallace collection.